is my pleasure to be moderating this panel, which is titled Liberation Music. So we're hoping to have an energetic discussion about that very important topic. Before we begin, I would like to let you know that books by the authors in this program can be purchased from Greenlight Bookstore outside on the plaza. And the authors will also be signing their books immediately following this program at the signing tables downstairs in the rotunda. And so I'm supposed to remind you all at the conclusion, please go to the signing so that actually can happen. So I want to start just by giving really quick introductions of each of the authors, and then I have some questions that I brought with me, and in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll open up the floor for your questions and conversation. So, let's see. Immediately to my left is Vivienne Goldman. Born in London, Vivienne has been a music journalist for more than 40 years and was a trusted chronicler of Bob Marley and Fela Kuti. She was a member of the new wave bands Chantage and the Flying Lizards. Resolutionary, a retrospective compilation of her work, was released in 2016. She is an adjunct professor teaching punk, Afrobeat, and reggae at New York University, where the Vivienne Goldman Punk and Reggae collection is archived in the Fales Library. A former documentarian, her 5 previous books include The Book of Exodus, The Making and Meaning of Bob Marley and the Wailers Album of the Century. Her latest book, which I can hold up, is Revenge of the She-Punks, A Feminist Music History from Polystyrene to Pussy Riot. There is also an audiobook that Vivienne narrated that is also available. And she just told me that on Friday she was awarded Best Music Writer of the Year in the English language at the Reeperbahn Festival in Germany. And then immediately to Vivienne's left is Stefanie Shawna, a professor and chair of the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies at UMass Amherst. In 2003, she earned a PhD in ethnomusicology and folklore with a minor in African-American studies from Indiana University. Her West African and West Indian heritage allows her to straddle the Black world comfortably, and she has published articles on Afrobeat, hip-hop, and country music. Her books include The Life of Camilla Williams, African-American classical singer and opera diva, Soul, and that's in 2011, the book Soul, Country, and the USA, Race and Identity in American Music Culture, 2015, and Black Lives Matter and Music, published in 2018, which is co-edited with Fernando Orella, and coming out this year or already out is Black Resistance in the Americas. It's already out. So that's Stefanie. And we also have, on the very end, Ian Brennan, a Grammy-winning producer for Tinariwen, Zamba Prison Project, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott. He has produced 3 other Grammy-nominated albums and published 5 books, while also teaching violence prevention around the world since 1993 for such prestigious organizations as New York's New School, the University of London, UC Berkeley, and the National Academia of Science in Rome. His work has been featured on the front page of the New York Times, PBS Television, and in an Emmy Award-winning 60-minute segment with Anderson Cooper reporting. He has worked with diverse artists, including Fugazi, Merle Haggard, Sleater Kinney, and John Waters. His latest book is Silenced by Sound, The Music Meritocracy Myth. And we hope to have a copy of that up here so I can hold that up to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome to you all, and whoever wants to jump in should jump in. And I really just want to start by asking you, why do you think music is a productive space for a practice of the politics of liberation? And you can certainly link this to what you wrote about in your any of the books that you've published. But why do you think music is a productive space for a practice of the politics of liberation?
Okay, I'll start. My book is Black Lives Matter and Music, and that became a labor of love as well as a really logical place to start when we think about what is going on right now with race in the United States and also globally. We realized, we went to a conference, Society for Ethnomusicology, and started to just talk about how music was part of the movement. And so the book came out of that. And to Maureen's question about why we think music is the place to start in these conversations, is that when we think of Black people, whether we're thinking of them here in the United States or anywhere around the world, Black people are always on the periphery of power, whether we are majority or minority. And so we don't have the luxury to make art for art's sake, usually. We use art to comment on what is going on around us, and particularly in terms of the imbalance of power that we encounter, whether we're in the Caribbean or in Kenya or Zimbabwe or here in the United States. So music has always been an integral part of the various waves of movements through history and around the world, and it's definitely a wonderful place to start, whether it's reggae or Afrobeat or hip hop, and so the way we dealt with it in the book was to think about all the various ways that we can think of music or how music can help us think about the movement in this current era.
Hello. So I'd like to say that I actually was first published writing about music in, let's be honest, about 1974 or 5, I'm not joking. So in that time, I have seen the role of music within society shift quite a lot. When I started out on the British rock press Inkies in the time of punk, music was virtually the only medium for youth, and people were galvanized even around these papers that I used to work on, like NME, New Musical Express, Melody Maker. I mean, even in New York, people would go and queue up at the Gem Spa on 2nd Avenue to buy these things because it was like the only medium. How different is it today? So, we've seen, obviously music journalism is in kind of crisis in a way, although, there are optimistic things. Those of us who used to get paid by the word, we do notice these things. And similarly with music. However, my question is also, do we really have to wait till we're completely embattled and massively in the mix of the frontline struggle before music responds, right? Because I was raised by Bob Marley and Fela Kuti. That's just a fact. They mentored me. So I was used to this idea of music as activism. In fact, it's frankly given me a meaning for my whole life, right? And it's why I'm sitting here today. So I noticed, as luck would have it, in The Guardian, just the other day, quite an interesting article that perked me up, where it was saying, Lanre Bakare, who's a very good writer that some of you here may know, most political in years. In other words, now that there's a massive global identity crisis, not only here, where we know our issues here, but also where I come from in the UK, they're all going mental, right? Because nobody knows what's happening. However, we are seeing a rise in interesting political music because of it, which goes to prove something that I've spent my whole life trying to show wasn't true. That at times, like in war or immediate, big full-on the barricades, you get more political art. I like to think that it was just our birthright for any old time, but recent events are just waking me up to the fact that apparently it's true. It takes massive crises, you know, in times of big crises, yeah, you will get more political artists emerging, you know, and of course, might as well mention my book. No, you know, because I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been sort of liberated by punk, because prior to that in music, it wasn't, in a way, not much fun for women. Just trust me on that, you know, and because there was nothing, you know, everything was determined by a very patriarchal industry. And I, in this book, talk to people, you know, Africa, China, Japan, Colombia, people all over the world, Spain, you know, people all over, and just want to put in my 2 cents with it. I think music is still extremely valuable as an agent for change, partly because we can all, like, do it, you know. We can all do it and make a little change in our community by just sort of finding a large room with a guitar and a bit of percussion, gather a community, you know. So I think music still has its place, and punk within it, because it's so primal and immediate, you know. So yes, I vote for music as a continuing engine for change.
Ian?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that concerns me is that music is treated, popular culture is treated as a triviality, and it's so far from that. It permeates our daily lives. And the fact that Sweet Home Alabama is allowed to be played anywhere in America is sickening. The fact that the Rolling Stones can break the all-time concert grossing record this past year and make $12 million in a night and play Brown Sugar as the next to last or last song in their set is disgusting. These are not trivialities. And so I think that we need to take it more seriously, what we consume. And I think capitalism has done a tremendous job of rendering us passive, of making us feel like there are some people that are musical and others that are not. And that is fucking bullshit. Everybody in this room is as musical as Bob Dylan. Everybody in this room is as musical as anybody you're paying $300 to see. And so the problem is that punk rock was meant to be that there were no stars, not that anybody could be a star. And it just lowered it for a lot of people, that now we have mediocrity. And so what we did with recording is turn music into an object, which made it sellable and could divorce the labor from the person and exploit it to a larger degree. Then we had videos that made it visual, and now we've come full circle and you have people watching videos with the sound off. Fuck that.
So I think this comes out in Stefanie's book and in the comments that Ian and Vivienne both made about kind of do it yourself. So maybe if we could just talk about how people, what are some of the ways in this, you know, the context that you're writing about, where you see or hear people using music to kind of turn things the other way?
I mean, you know, one of the things that struck me recently, and I realize I'm referring to articles, but I suppose I'm just a punter at the end of the day, but, you know, I was very encouraged, and actually some of my students at NYU had been telling me about it. This article the other day about the DJ women in Brooklyn called Women Work. Did you happen to see it or hear of it? No, it's literally, you know, while the industry is devolving in a sense and the traditional income streams are a bit kaput, and also women never had access, as we know. But, you know, these women DJs in Brooklyn made a collective away from I'm not a separatist, no disrespect to our brothers, you know, away from the mansplaining, you know, and they set up a whole network till now they've created. You see, to me, a lot of this comes down to what you were saying. How do you make a living?
You shouldn't make a living from music.
But
no one should make a living from music.
Well,
no one should depend on it. The best music came from the people. It was something they did to entertain themselves at night and their families. They didn't do it to have a fucking career because they wrote one good song when they were 20 years old.
No, I totally agree with you, because I really hark back to the old days, like, not that I was there, but we're in pubs, you know, everybody would gather around the old Joanna, and this whole thing of being a star and all that, and removing you from the normal flow of life, I agree with you, is just garbage. Yeah. So yeah, let's harken back. And the devolution of the industry, in fact, feeds into that, so that we can make these community music things where we engage and express our feelings. I know people are doing it. Concerts in living rooms, you know. And if we're being forced into that, maybe it's not so bad.
I mean, I think that's a lovely thought. But if I could just sort of push back a little bit, particularly in societies like this, where, for example, African Americans have brought a great deal of attention to American pop culture, American musical culture, because of their talents. And when you set that against the kinds of prejudices that are in the employment workplace, right? Why can't they make money off their music? I think that if Bob Dylan can take a slave tune and create Blowing in the Wind and make money off of that, why can't 2 Chainz make music, or P. Diddy, or well, he's not a good example, but why can't they make music, or Chuck Berry, or James Brown, or Aretha Franklin? You know, I heard a conversation recently about Waffle House and how African Americans should have boycotted Waffle House a couple years ago when something racial went down there. And the response was, yes, we could do that, but then a lot of people would lose their jobs. A lot of ex-felons who get jobs at places like Waffle House would be out of jobs and not able to feed their children or their families. So while I really applaud the idea of bringing the folk back into music, which is where it really did start, the reality is that we are living in a world right now that has made so much money and capital off Bob Marley or Fela Kuti or any number of African or African American or Afro-Caribbean artists, that throwing that all out really would harm a lot of people, a lot of artists.
I do think we should be able to make a living with art. I don't think it's just a no-no. Okay.
Totally serious.
Okay. I didn't see the little light go on over your head.
I didn't hear what you said either.
I thought I was being a little facetious. Just a little.
But you're not. But you're actually. That's actually what you say in your book. That you're.
No, I'm not. It's a little facetious.
A little
Yeah.
facetious,
No,
okay.
not a lot. No, I mean, I think the expectation that if you're driven to play music because you want money, and if you make so much money, more than you need, I think you're playing music for the wrong reasons. I think the best music that's done is done for free. And I think that this culture puts nothing under greater scrutiny and suspicion than charity. Because to know that people do something because they want to do it would mean that money was not involved. And so I think that the best music that has ever been done and will be done and continually be done, so we don't need to have hope about house concerts or DJs, is the music of parents consoling their children. That's being done right now all over the world. It's been done for time immemorial. It will be done forever. And that's the musicality of every individual. There is no amusical culture. There are no asexual people. We would not be here if there was an asexual people. There's no amusical people. Every language has music embedded in it, not just tone languages. You can't walk if you don't have rhythm, and you can't talk if you don't have pitch and musicality. And I think that the denial of that is a problem. So you have a lot of guitar-owning people, and they say, well, I'm a musician. That's ownership. But then I work with a lot of people who think they're not musicians. They've never done it. And to hear them create music, to me, is one of the most beautiful things in the world, to see that potential unlocked. And that's what we've done with projects like the Tanzania Albinism Collective, with the Zomba Prison Project in Malawi, which was the world's poorest country at the time, is with people that do not consider themselves musicians and sometimes even resist attempting. But then when they do, what you hear is beautiful. And I really believe it comes back to this idea that if somebody wants to lead, they should not be allowed to, and someone who doesn't want to should be forced to. If somebody wants to be president of the United States, they should probably be incarcerated, regardless of whether they become president or not, because they have to be a little crazy to want that. And then other people that are more meek and humble, humility, charity are so undervalued in our culture.
So we're, kind of talking about the politics of, in your books, you're talking about the politics of listening and the politics of representation of those listeners, and with Stefanie, with certain practices around music. So I wonder if you could, music and politics. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the politics associated with listening, with participation in music. From your experience in the punk scene, Ian, from your experience working with artists or with people who are performing. I don't know if I should even call them, artists, if that's a terminology.
Artists, but they don't consider themselves.
Yeah.
When I was coming up, I don't even know whether I would have got into the music scene if I was starting out today. It was a very exhilarating time where you felt that, music was a crucible for revolution, and it was. And there was none of this, and I was a PR for part of the time as well as a journalist, initially. And there wasn't all this. I'm sorry, but maybe it's in the English nature to debunk people who are very full of themselves and think they're stars, because we have this idea, we all agree on, that music it's just a popular thing, that open your mouth and sing. Many of us can do it. But I find now, you open the magazines, everything is completely sanitized. Where's the irreverence? Where's the critical distance, that there should be? It's just also a lot of the industry, the artists, a lot of them are full of themselves, aren't they? Am I right? And you know what I mean, the big stars quote in the industry. And I do come from that generation that believed in destroying that wall, and we're all artists together, just like Ian was saying, we all have artistry within. Just because somebody got a deal and sold a lot doesn't mean that they're better than you, I'm sorry, So I think that's a cultural gap between England and America, where, we count on the irreverence, and we don't but although I'm in America now, I'm still English in that regard. So, that was the politics, to not have that, the artists be superior and protected from, as it were, the people, but all in it together more.
So I think one of the things I'd love to talk to you about is the difference in radio history, in the history of radio, because I think that had a lot to do with the turn that American pop music took. And I think that radio in the UK is quite different from radio as it evolved in the United States. But having said that, to Maureen's question, I do think, so in the book I talk about how the students at Mizzou, which is where I was teaching when everything went down in 2015, I write about how the students really used music in a very political way, not only in terms of when they were marching, but also in those quiet times when it became very personal, when they needed to rest and regroup and reflect on what was going on with the media attention. So I would ask them, what are you listening to? And it was everything from Stevie Wonder's Love's in Need of Love Today, which is just a sort of a beautiful love song that helped them think about why they were doing what they were doing, to Kendrick Lamar's all right, we're gonna be all right. So I found that very interesting to see what this generation of students were doing. But also, if I may just offer this as well, I don't dismiss Beyonce or Chance the Rapper or Kendrick because, you know, I am Nigerian, my husband is Nigerian as well. Our children were born in the United States. So in terms of, I watched their identities as they negotiated the liminality, this space that they occupy between being African and being American, and therefore a kind of African American. And I found that it was the music that really helped them understand the politics of their identities as unique Black people in the United States. It was when my daughter listened to Lemonade and had a conversation with me about about Black womanhood as it was coming through Beyonce or Lizzo or whoever, right? It was my son listening to J. Cole, right? And understanding what it was to be a young Black man in this country that my husband, who is Yoruba, who could never help him understand in that particular way. So I think when we think of the politics of music, it becomes very personal, and I don't think that we can dismiss even those who are like on the front cover of Vogue magazine, because they are having an impact on generations of young people, not only here, in Nigeria as well, which is where I'm from.
You know, I think it's very much don't hate them because they're beautiful. I write about Beyonce and her sister Solange's relationship in here. I think they've been a few for feminism, let alone what I observed for young black females. They were absolutely huge. So, and Kendrick, I'm surprised. I mean, he was like a beacon when he came out, when I was talking to the students and all that. They were seeing him almost like a Marley type figure. He was the only one at that moment stepping forward, or not the only one, so I'm being a bit like journalistic lees. But, you know, he was a dominant, he was listened to, and it was so encouraging and cheering to have Kendrick around. I didn't know people were dissing him. But I just want to say, vis-a-vis Nigeria, where I've been lucky enough to work with a lot, still working with Nigeria, and I was just actually on another panel in London. It was at a museum, actually, at the Hayward Gallery. They were talking about museum practice and sending back the Benin bronzes and so on, which is sort of huge issue. And I was moved to say at that panel, you know, I'm only a visitor, as it were, because in my younger years I had this connection with Nigeria, and it sustained because I guess we loved the people. There was a love between me and like fell in the family, and I've never known, maybe unfashionable to say this, but I've never known Nigerian culture be so much loved around the world. It's, you know, like the art scene. I'm just happy to see that Lagos is like really in a boom town at the moment, it seems, for culture, not only music, where Nigeria is carrying the swing with the influence of what they call Afrobeats, though it's nothing like Afrobeat, actually. I'm just happy to see it, you know. It's the first time in my life that I've seen more of that playing field. You know, the playing field has been convulsing, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, and might we be on the verge of seeing things get a tiny bit more level after X hundred years of basically aggro, you know?
I think so. I mean, I think that we're in a moment because we should mention Nollywood as well, which is huge. And a couple years ago, Drake did, you know, Drake too.
Drake.
You know, do we talk about him?
Wizkid,
right? So Drake did something with Wizkid. Now Burna Boy is very big on the international stage. So I think that we're in a moment for Nigerian music.
And the art world. I have to maybe, you know, I have for a while been working on an art book with Joralemon, who was Fella's artist. And we've been excitedly emailing because, you know, the art scene there has never been, it's so appreciated. Actually, I've been talking about, like, women and stuff because of the book. And may I just point out that if anybody's confused about women not having always had a fair shake until, you know, for most of history, it becomes very clear if you look at the art world, because you think of how few female artists, you know. People maybe get a bit obfuscated because some musical women are always in the forefront, but we're in a time of change, and if for those who didn't have a handle on it, just think of the artists. Now, a woman, your daughter, you can say to her, yeah, be a visual artist. You can function at it, you know. I know Ian doesn't always think that it's a way of making a living, but sometimes I think if you're going to develop in your art...
I didn't understand what I think.
Oh, okay.
What did you say?
No, I know you were being flippant, and you told me the light had gone off over your head, which I'd missed, you know, saying it was flippant. But yeah, sometimes you get to be a good artist if you put a lot of work into it and time. And sometimes you just can't. Sometimes art, I mean, I don't mean to sound very naive, but sometimes some arty people are not as good at accountancy.
So I don't think I can say anything to synthesize this whole conversation, but one of the things that I'm hearing are just sort of different types of uses of music, and the way, I mean, there are a couple things that happen. One of the things is this turning of the revolt, the punk revolt that Vivienne is writing about in her book, into fashion and style, and sort of defanging it. And so the commodification or the co-optation. So there's always this, the people up below have to keep making changes in what they're doing and try to take it back. So there's always that struggle. But then there's also what Stefanie was describing is even as you get these sort of highly commodified and widely circulated, and you know, as Ian is problematizing those circulations, you get the way people use the music that may be different from the intent of the industry that produces it. And so I don't know that anyone really cared that beyond that Lemonade was going, like the industry didn't care that Lemonade was going to be this feminist statement. They wanted something that sold. But for the young women, especially who are listening to it, they're taking it on and moving in directions that perhaps no one was anticipating. So we kind of never know with what these forms are going to do as they get unleashed. And so with that said, I want to open the floor to you. I'm imagining that something has been sparked by these comments. And I think we have a mic. I don't know how the sound is in this room. Do you want to, I don't know if you've been using a mic, or can people hear? Yeah. Or go ahead. Okay. Do you want to recognize the people who are raising hands, or? But so please speak up, because I think just so everyone can really hear.
Hey.
Okay, my question is this. I think that there's a lot of good points that were made. I'm a musician. My name is Dylan. I market myself as the Bob Dylan of neurodiversity. And one of the things I've noticed as somebody who wants to do rock and roll on the experience of autistic people is the rate of tokenization that happens. Because I find the inspiration porn narrative to be something that, you know, a lot of people's work get lumped into, and when you rebel against it, that's seen as bad. You know, I've done it a lot. I've written a lot of things in the style of Sex Pistols, and it's quite interesting to me that no other neurodivergent musician has done this, you know.
Is there a question? Do you have a?
So,
Yeah.
the question that I had was, going forward, how can these narratives that we share from these movements, how can they be not tokenized and actually seen as something serious?
I'm linking that to what you were just saying about the commodification. But my feeling about that, because that question always comes up, but I don't know whether we can escape the dread hand of commodification, because there's a lot of highly paid advertising agencies. But to me, in that knowledge, I think that we can't let it take all art away from us. We just have to express ourselves and continue to express ourselves. And, punk was a movement that I was associated with and just wrote a book about. And everybody's always banging on about this commodification, because it's true that all the transgressive clothes that we used to wear and find in junk shops and thrift shops, you get them at the mall now. But still, that basically flame of rage burning within, that is still there, and we're still going to want to shout it out and bark it out, even if some of the clothes that were associated with punk are found in the mall. I don't think we can let this idea of commodification stop us in our tracks.
I think what I'm concerned about is there's over 100,000 full music releases in America every year. So you're competing against noise, you're competing against the sound. The sheer volume of it. And there's overrepresentation not of countries, but even cities like New York, like even neighborhoods, like Brooklyn and London. They get thousands and thousands and thousands of bands, and entire countries get zero internationally. And so my concern is equality. And the big mistake that's made by media people like at NPR or whatever is, we treat everybody equally. We treat everybody the same. That's not what equality is. Equality is making sure that everybody has the same chance, which means that it's not charity. If you have two records and one of them's from Brooklyn and one of them's from Nigeria, play the record from Nigeria. It's fucking easy. If you've got a record by a woman or a man and they're both pretty good, play the record by the woman. So I would say that here today, if you buy a book, you should buy these 3 books first and then mine. And I'm serious about this. And then you can go steal mine or whatever. But I should be last. Or you should buy 2 and then decide. And again, I'm not saying to support something you don't believe in, but I'm saying if somebody doesn't believe that there's good music everywhere, they're wrong. And most people, even most liberal people, can only name one person from a country, if any. So a country like Pakistan, 219 million people, gets one singer ever? That's wrong. And so, and you know who that singer is. And so this is our concern. So I challenge anybody here, you get a free t-shirt from South Sudan, anybody here who can name their favorite artist from the Central African Republic.
While you're thinking of your answer,
while you're checking your phones.
we have another question.
If you even try. There you go.
I'm a tenor, a singer in the New York City Labor Chorus, and we have 85 singers, and we sing old labor songs and songs of protest. We're singing, we sing at street demonstrations. We're singing a concert next month at the People's Voice Cafe. We sing at the Great Labor Arts Exchange every year in Washington. These labor choruses, ours and several others, were formed by Pete Seeger years ago throughout the country. And occasionally we have what they call a great choral convergence in Washington of all these labor choruses at the Great Labor Arts Exchange. I'd urge you to come out and see us at the People's Voice Cafe. I'm also curious if we have a counterpart in the UK.
Actually, it's my ignorance, I just don't know. But I would think that there very likely is a sort of trade union congress choir.
I think it's Ed Sheeran. Just broke the record, all-time concert grossing record ever in history, which I think is a sign of the apocalypse, if nothing.
And, people like Billy Bragg, there has always been voices of protest.
Billy Bragg has broken the bottom record, probably. He's probably broken the bottom record, not the top.
By the way, are you talking about like Franco and Tabule Rochereau?
No.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for this great panel. So every culture has a music, many musics, and music can be a great way to share culture, to share meaning across cultures. I'm wondering what your thoughts what your thoughts are on cultural appropriation, which happens a lot when music crosses with capitalism.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Thank you.
Who wants to go first?
Oh, I will go.
We're
so,
all ready to go.
I've just written something that will come out soon about appropriation. And I've written before about appropriation because when we think of appropriation, we do have to think of power and money. You can't talk about it without that. But also, I was thinking a lot about what it means because Africans are now, and specifically Nigerians and Ghanaians, are now appropriating African American culture. And I wanted to think about that. Is it the same lens we look at them when they are, doing hip life or hip hop, as we would when Vanilla Ice is doing it, right? And the way I came round to it was because Black artists, and I'm talking about Black things because that's what I study, and that's who I am. But also, I realized that, and I wrote about how because Black artists all, at the end of the day, pull from the same cultural pool, that there's a different way that we should talk about appropriation when it comes to either Wizkid doing Drake or when it comes to Beyonce doing whatever she did last. She actually did a little fella as well in her last video, and I think that conversation should be very different because they have the same. If we trace it back, we will see that they're pulling from the same, or they're dipping into the same pool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad. I mean, I've had to write quite a few things about it and teach quite a lot about it, and my brain almost starts to explode with the level of information. I completely agree with you, because the point about cultural appropriation, I think it should be divorced in a way from like the creative side, because it's all about the rapaciousness of the white world that has ripped off the black world, and that's the problem, as opposed to artists using each other's art. Because when you look at music, it's almost impossible to unravel the skein. In fact, I was talking to Jason King, my mentor at NYU, about the fellow course that I'm about to teach, and I was saying, in one class I'm thinking of discussing it from the point of view of cultural appropriation. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, but fella used loads of things, loads of diasporic things. And I don't know, it's like, I'm on the same quest, I think, with you, to find a way to talk about these huge and real issues while preserving, some flow of art. Because the problem is, people having been iced out of the conversation and ripped off and exploited and savaged, financially and in their morale and their heart and soul. That is the issue, not the to me, that people should all have their voice and get paid. That is sort of a lot of the root of it. Everybody should be able to get paid more equitably. As Ian points out, we're looking for more equity. That's between all of our voices. We're wanting the voices, just like Ian said, the voices that have been hidden to be heard, and we want more equity, but we still want a free exchange of artistic ideas. I had a girl, I was teaching about the Slits, remember the Slits? Ari Up, the singer, and she was a German girl with dreadlocks when it was quite unusual. But that was our mixed multicultural world, and we thought it was a sign of our positive future, if anything. And then one of the students had a go at me, how dare she rock these dreadlocks? And I must admit, this was a few years ago, I was gobsmacked, okay? Because I was so used to it being understood and perceived as a sign of one love, And anyway, we had a long discussion, but I showed her a photo of George Clinton. And, he had his blue, yellow, and red hair. I said, is he any the less a black man? Anyway, also we had I mean, this is too much for this moment because we've got to keep moving, but if anybody wants to talk to me about it later, I could actually bang on about it for hours.
Do we have another question?
Ian
So-
can
Oh,
Ian
I'm sorry.
speak?
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm not.
Yes, you
Okay,
are.
let me
Yes,
just
you
go.
are.
Let me go ahead quickly. I just wanted to talk about something specific, a bit of a narrative, if that's okay, rather than talking abstractly. My mother-in-law is from Rwanda. She lost her entire family in the first two genocides in 1957 and 1973. They aren't counted because they weren't big enough. Right now, at this moment, I think it's relevant. The two men, the duo, the core of the good ones that we have worked with for over a decade are boarding a plane, I hope. Hope they're not being prevented from doing that, to come to the United States for the first time. And they, after 3 records, after a record that was the last one, named as one of the top 50 records of the year by the Sunday London Times, and having an opportunity to play in England and an opportunity to tour in Germany, I submitted a 150-page application for them to come here because they were invited by Glenn Hansard, who's an Academy Award-winning and Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter. Their new record is coming out. This is not meant as a pitch. Their new record is coming out on Anti, really respected label. Members of Slater-Kinney, Wilco, TV on the Radio, Fugazi, and My Bloody Valentine play on it, but that's not why it's good. It's good because Adrian is such a gifted individual. So their visas were approved, and they went for their interview at the embassy, and within 5 minutes they were rejected. Because what they saw, I can only imagine, you can't go in with them, they wouldn't look at their paperwork. They're not required to look at their paperwork. What they saw were 2 middle-aged farmers that don't speak English and were dirty. And they thought it was a joke, essentially. They just couldn't believe it was true. So we reapplied, you can't appeal, and we went back again, and just a week ago, just in time, they were approved. And they're coming to America. And they will be at Joe's Pub a week from Monday. They will be at McNally and Jackson with me with the new book for free next Sunday. I would really encourage you to come. And it comes down to this thing that people say, like, we'll catch them next time. There is no next time. They're probably never coming back. And this is the first original music group in Kinyarwanda to sing in Kinyarwanda ever to come to the United States that anybody knows of. There have been folkloric groups, which is great. I'm not anti-anything, but they're the first. But beyond that, Adrian Guerra is probably one of the greatest living post-Dylan writers in the world. He's up there with Vic Chestnut. He's up there with Jason Isbell. He's up there. He is amazing. And they sing so well together. But because he sings in Kinyarwanda, he's world music. Yeah. Because he's from Rwanda, he's not roots music. He's roots music. He's a farmer. He still works as a farmer. And he's incredible. It's not charity. He's incredible. And somebody like NPR, not to pick on them, but I am picking on them. Somebody like NPR, to ignore that, they're not cheating him. They're not cheating me. They're not cheating the record label. They're cheating their listeners due to their own arrogance to believe that they listen to everything and understand the world better than they do.
Absolutely. And can I just say that Sirius, which is how a lot of people receive music, they used to even have a thing, The Joint, about Caribbean music, but I'm not even sure they have that. And some years ago, I mean, the whole world music title is an embarrassment, as we all know, right? It just means music not in English. How arrogant and colonial mentality is that? But still, they haven't even got their show anymore for music not in English. That means you can't, it's obscene. It is obscene. And it's funny, because back in England, we used to look at America and look at things like the Tammy Show, where you would have James Brown. It was very mixed, and we were always very impressed by that in England, but where's it gone? It gets more and more apartheid over here. Because here it doesn't have the investment in multiculturalism like I was raised on, which, multiculturalism has become a bit of a dirty word in some circles nowadays. But, it's an ideal and I think an ideal that if we don't stick to it, what is going to happen to us, because there's only X amount of space on the planet, although it's true that with the global warming, we're gaining Greenland. But you know, we've got to get it. I'm sorry, but how are we going to manage if we don't communicate?
I wanted to just give Ian another chance to, I think you should pitch about the good ones and their
Okay.
show, what's coming up with them next
Okay.
week, because, I mean, the people who are in this room, it's exactly the kind of thing they would be interested in.
Okay. Yeah,
hearing,
and I really didn't mean it
participating
as a pitch. I really mean it that I believe in them, but it's also literally, when I'm done here, I'm going to look at my phone and it's either going to say they got on the plane or they didn't get on the plane. They had checked in, but I'll give you an example of what we're dealing with and the complexity of it. I mean, not that you don't know, but just a concrete example is last year we brought from Rwanda as well the group Abattoir, who are amazing. It was some members of a huge collective. And they got their visas. It was two people that had traveled out of the country before, and then the mother, who's incredible, who'd never traveled out of the country before, she's 75. And they were prevented from boarding the flight by the airline staff in Rwanda, which we see more and more. When I fly to America, it's the airline staff that haze me. And I'm so confused by it. It's like, you know, I paid, so she didn't want them to go. She could not believe that these rural people, it's about rural, urban most of the
Class.
time, that they were gonna be allowed to go to England. So fortunately, we'd booked, you know, we padded an extra day and they were able to come. And that's why I have that fear. But it's the good ones from Rwanda, it's the duo. They will be for free at McNally and Jackson next Sunday with me at 6 p.m. And also Banning Iyer from Afropop will be there. And then they're also at Joe's Pub the next night. And I think the tickets are really reasonable, but they're incredible. The first two records were incredible, and the new record is beyond that. The new record is really, really, really touching.
Thank you. So we have one last question, and you've been very kind in writing it out, so I will, if I mess it up, please correct me. Are there platforms, systems, or ways to tell stories of great underground music?
You mean beyond the ones we know about? Well, I'm not quite sure.
Did you have something beyond writing a book about it or circulating
Making
it?
a podcast?
Yeah, podcast.
Yeah, I do.
What do you mean?
Podcast. I'm a music writer. I try and represent local music as best I can. I guess part of my question, and this kind of ties into the critique you mentioned about capitalism, is how to build something and project things out there in a way that's cool and real, without selling out. I guess perhaps being real, being genuine, getting important stories that aren't, you know, necessarily top 40 stories, but.
No, I think Stefanie should.
No, I don't have an answer. I
You don't have an answer.
I think that I think my generation, and I'm 50, my generation wants to kind of go back underground and find that music, but the generation that I teach, they find it, they stream it, and a lot of it is commercial, which we don't like, but they love. So I think there's a middle ground and a balance that we should find. I don't know. That's an answer.
I think
So-
use
Thank you.
any media outlet you can that will let your ideas out as uncut as possible.
Oh, thank
Boom.
you so much.
So we do have to wrap up. I'm to read a closing statement. Thank you for coming. The authors will now be signing their books in the rotunda downstairs. Greenlight Books is selling their books on the plaza. And authors, just to remind you, please bring your placards. These are the books. Ian Brennan's Silenced by Sound looks like this. Stefanie Shawnakin's Black Lives Matter and Music, and Vivienne Goldman's Revenge of the She-Punks. So please support these authors, support non-mainstream music, and thank you for supporting the Brooklyn Book Festival.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want us all to